This audio presentation of the Sun Papers, number 42, The Seven Spirits Before the Throne, is brought to you by Christ Consciousness Channel. Copyright 2023, all rights reserved. In the last two papers, using the law of analogy, as above so below, and as below so above, we showed you from the standpoint of consciousness, the consciousness of your spiritual self, how everything that appears to your mind is but an idea or center of consciousness, a center of force, an expression of the one mind. We also showed that it is only the separate human mind, in its attempt to understand and interpret such ideas pressing from within, that builds in its consciousness forms, organs, and organisms to house and confine the forces of these ideas, not knowing that such forms, organs, and organisms exist only in its consciousness as mental pictures, and have no actual reality except as symbols of the ideas they hide. You have seen how the mind has outpictured to itself certain centers of its own consciousness, faculties and qualities of the soul, as different organs and parts making up the physical body, in its efforts to express the life force pushing forth from within. You have also seen how it has pictured the great centers of cosmic forces expressing through what is called the planet Earth. And now we will conclude this series of explanations of the relationships of things that appear to the spiritual realities expressing through them, by considering for a while what is our solar system and the different cosmic forces that comprise it. We will of course start with the sun. From what we have said about the earth and the divine being manifesting as the physical planet that is our terrestrial home, you can see now that the sun must be but the symbol of the wondrous being, who is the Father God and ruler of all things appearing to dwell within the confines of our world system. That would mean that the 7 planets now admitted as belonging to our solar system, Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, and Uranus, named in the order of their supposed proximity to the Sun, Mercury being the nearest to it, and Uranus the farthest away, and all said to be revolving around the Sun, would also be divine beings, having some very mystical relation to the Father God and to each other. We will consider the Sun and the solar system first as the grand man, in whom the whole system and all in it live, move, and have their being. For you must remember that as all is consciousness, it is in God's, this great being's consciousness that all exist, each individual thing from atom to planet being an idea or center of his consciousness. As the so-called planets are the greatest and therefore the chief centers of that consciousness, they must be similar to the chief centers of man's consciousness, the brain or thinking center, the heart or emotional center, the solar plexus or life center, and the generative organs or creative center, including the 3 higher functional centers of the mind, which we will indicate later. We might say that Mercury represents the thinking faculty of God's consciousness, Venus the emotional quality, Earth the life center, Mars the creative faculty, Jupiter the religious or devotional quality, Saturn the testing, restraining, disciplining, purifying, perfecting qualities, and Uranus the uniting, freeing, all-seeing, and all-knowing faculties. For as God includes within himself all faculties, qualities, and powers, as well as all life, so must these work through forces or agencies of his own nature. And as the whole solar system is but the expression of his nature or being, then all the forces operating in our solar system must be under the direction of those great faculties of his consciousness, represented outwardly as the 7 planets mentioned, but now known inwardly to be divine beings, and who are actually the 7 spirits before the throne of God. Just as all earthmen are centers of God's consciousness, even if no more than atoms in his cosmic body, so we could say that these 7 great spirits are the 7 divine faculties or qualities of his God mind, but manifesting as the great radiations of light, life, and force, known as the 7 planets of our solar system. And even as the 7 centers of our physical bodies, representing the 7 greater faculties and qualities of our minds, are each composed of billions of cell centers of consciousness, so would all living things on these 7 planets be but cells or atoms, minute centers of consciousness, of the great beings who are ensouling them. There is much more that could be said of the sun and the planetary bodies of these great beings, all of whose forces, life and nature, are comprising and expressing the life and consciousness of the Great One we know as God. But we leave it to you to receive direct from Him within you what He wishes you to know, after suggesting one or two more lines of approach. Even as He symbolizes Himself to you as the sun, the source of all light, heat, and power, as well as of all life and consciousness on our planet Earth and on all other planets revolving around the sun, you can now see that He is in reality not without and afar off up in the skies, but is that center deep within you that is radiating Himself out to the circumference of your human mind, and thereby forming within your consciousness a mighty world of forces, powers, and activities, comparable only to what you can imagine are all about you in the outer world, extending to the farthermost reaches of our visible solar system. Yes, all of the forces, powers, and activities that you can thus imagine are actually within you, for there is nothing that is outside your consciousness. Therefore, all the wisdom, power, and possibilities of every being in the solar system, which includes that of the great beings who are the rulers of the 7 planets, and that of very God Himself, are within you, are a part of you, ready to respond to and serve you in your need, whenever you call upon them, fully knowing this truth. Think of this until you grasp its mighty significance. Then, here is something new, never before given out, but which in the light of what has been shown above you can now see for yourself must be true. The solar universe is pictured to you with the sun as a center, and with the planets Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, and Uranus revolving around it. But we say that instead of these being planets revolving around the sun, they are realms of consciousness surrounding the central consciousness that is called the sun. The first realm being the consciousness called Mercury, or the mental world. The second realm called Venus, or the emotional world. The third realm being the Earth, or the desire world, in which the bulk of its humanity is now manifesting. The fourth realm being Mars, or the world of creative forces, through which Earth humanity has evolved. While the fifth, sixth, and seventh realms of Jupiter, Saturn, and Uranus are the divine worlds, through which the sons of God, the higher selves of humanity, descended or involved themselves, and from which they worked while evolving the consciousness of their former miscreations up through the mineral, vegetable, and animal kingdoms to the stage where they could ensoul it. This was finally accomplished in the Mars realm, with the help of the great being who was its ruler and of his lieutenants, and the further unfoldment of consciousness in individual souls then proceeded under the immediate direction of the sons of God in that realm known as the Earth state of consciousness, residing between the Mars and Venus realms. In other words, the consciousness of what we call the Earth humanity is now in that state of redemption where, having passed through the realm of Mars, called the generative or creative realm, where all forms from the lowest and densest of the mineral kingdom to those of domestic animals, the highest of the animal kingdom, were created for the use of man. Having evolved up through the lower stages of the desire world, it has reached the higher desire planes of consciousness, which accounts for man's being constantly torn between the desires of his higher and lower nature, although many souls have gone beyond and are now feeling the call of the lower Venus, or love forces within, while a lesser number have reached the higher planes of Venus, a few having entered the Mercury plane of consciousness, and some even the higher planes. Now, while Venus, or the emotional realm, and Mercury, the mental realm, are the two remaining realms through which the human consciousness must pass before entering the sun realm, we must remember that in the Father's house, or consciousness, there are many mansions or realms, and in reality, the Jupiter, Saturn, and Uranus realms, which seem to be beyond or outside the Mars realm, are actually the 3 higher, spiritual, celestial, and divine realms through which humanity's consciousness must pass before reaching the center of the sun, the Father's throne. They are the 3 realms, as was shown, through which the sons of God descended or involved in order to reach and redeem the earth consciousness. They necessarily have to return through these realms, but will bring with them the consciousness or the souls they have redeemed. It is because of these 3 planets or realms of consciousness, having no part in humanity's evolution strictly speaking, because that consciousness, when it reaches them and enters the sun, will be no longer human or separate from God, that they seem so far away and outside or beyond the Mars realm. While seemingly outside, as we have shown, these realms are really within our consciousness, for are we not traveling within towards the sun center of our being, and are not all ideas or centers of consciousness, including those of the 7 planets within our minds, all being centers of God's mind, which includes all? What we principally want you to see is that we are still contacting and are strongly influenced by the Mars realm, by its being next to the Earth realm on its outer side, while we are approaching the Venus realm on our inward journey. Through Venus's emotional states we must pass, taking with us and lifting up all its forces, and thereby acquiring the power to pass into and through the Mercury or mental realms, where in turn its forces, when conquered, will enable us to pass into the sun realms. But all this time we are being aided by the Jupiter, Saturn, and Uranus forces brought to us by our higher selves, the sons of God, in their descent to us from the sun center of our being through those 3 realms, and whose forces are always available for our use. In other words, in order to impress it more strongly on your mind, we will repeat: the sun center is within you, is the innermost center of your consciousness, and is not that sun up in the sky that you think is the visible center of the solar system. And every star and planet, including the Earth and all on it, as well as every other concept of your mind, are within your consciousness in realms reaching from the physical, the outermost, through an infinity of states of mind, soul, and spirit, to the sun itself, and then to the very throne of God, the innermost center of your being. Think this over until you grasp it. We have been trying to picture to you the most difficult thing possible, to make consciousness and forces appear to you as they are, and not what the human mind has been taught to believe them to be. In order to comprehend and accept what we have shown, you naturally will have to cast aside all former beliefs about the form and material side of planets, men, animals, etc., and try to view them as forces, the activities of consciousness deep within your own being. For all are actually in evidence there, hidden within your mind somewhere in the vast world of its consciousness, but always waiting and eager to come forth and serve you. Let us recapitulate. The sons of God, who were responsible for all consciousness that makes up the planet Earth, when the time came for its redemption, descended from their Father God's consciousness around his throne in the sun, into the Uranus realm, from there sending down into the darkness of the dense consciousness that was to become the Earth the first quickening impulse of their life forces, and began guiding that consciousness up through the various stages of the mineral kingdom, after which they descended a stage farther into Saturn's realm, and from there sent a new and higher impulse of life force, directing the evolution of consciousness up through the vegetable kingdom. Then, descending into Jupiter's realm, they sent a still higher impulse of life and power, directing the unfolding consciousness up through the animal kingdom. All of this took place in realms of consciousness, remember? And we are dealing only with ideas and thoughts in consciousness. So what seemed to be the mineral kingdom was only the darkest and densest state of consciousness, filled with thought creations of the basest and blackest sin and evil, to which no spiritual light could penetrate. In the vegetable stage of consciousness, the higher quickening impulse stimulated the life force therein to such effect that instinct was aroused. The first sign of awakening life, in its reaction and endeavor to respond to and reach out for the light. In the animal stage, instinct gradually became an actual desire for light, taking the form of hunger for food, in its effort to express the life forces pushing forth from within in response to the next quickening impulse, which in time developed eyes, ears, mouths, teeth, legs, and claws to enable it to seek, capture, and to fight for what it desired to eat, possess, or hold. All these reactions of the desire forces of consciousness develop what are called animal characteristics, which to the human mind outpictured themselves as actual animals. But the only animals that ever existed are the animal forces of desire that were in long-forgotten lives, allowed to rule without restraint. The yielding to these forces, and then later learning their harmful effects and trying to free itself from them, caused the mind to picture them in consciousness as the animals we know today. All of that lower stage of consciousness before it was incorporated in the human soul, was acquired in the Mars realm, and consciousness is now engaged in freeing itself from the desires of the human nature. Still largely animal, it is true, but more refined as it were, and which will always influence until the mind learns to rule both emotions and desire. From all this you will learn that man is actually a god, a solar system in miniature, and formed in the image and likeness of God. You will also learn that man therefore is of course not flesh and blood, but is pure consciousness or spirit, a center of God's mind, linked up with mighty forces that are waiting to lift him out of his limited consciousness into realms far beyond his mortal comprehension. These forces are his forces, for they are within him, but he must learn to master them, and they themselves will help him do this by combating him until they develop his strength and wisdom, before he can wisely and constructively use them. When he can do this, he becomes more than man, for then he enters the realm where they dwell as Lord and Conqueror, and they gladly become his servants. From this you can see that you need not stay down in the selfish desire realms of earth with the rest of humanity any longer than you wish, knowing the truth about yourself. For you are a divine being, actually a son of God, when you can let go of your sense of separation and unite your mind and consciousness with that of your higher self. Therefore, the time will come when you can easily enter the Venus, Mercury, or even the Sun realms of consciousness at will. For when the light of true understanding is yours, the light of the one who is the real you actually are in the Son and of the Son of God. So you now know that planets, the Earth and the Sun, are but realms or states of consciousness within yourself and within all men, and not places of habitation for men, human or superhuman. Just so long as you think of yourself as inhabiting or wanting to journey to other planes of consciousness as a separate being, are you limiting yourself and keeping yourself separate from the Sun Center, your Father's home in the kingdom. And do not confuse the 7 great beings with the planets or realms of consciousness which they rule, for they are actually the spirits around the throne of God, through whose states of consciousness, and with their aid which alone makes it possible, must all souls pass in their journey back within consciousness to their Father's home. Ponder over this before taking up what follows. Spiritual poverty. Did you ever try to interpret the spiritual meaning of the state or condition in which humanity finds itself today? The real cause? And do you know what alone will lift it out again into peace and harmony? Yes, we know we already have given one explanation. That it is because men have put all their trust in and dependence on money, on material things, on other men in high places, and because they have forgotten God. And this condition is to allow men to turn to these earthly sources for the help they need, and to show them that they cannot get it there, for such cannot or will not help them at the present time. So a few are beginning to realize that this was brought upon them by their higher selves to turn them to God, as the only power that can now save them, every other source having failed. But this does not give the underlying spiritual cause. What does all this poverty, hardship, and darkness symbolize? Let us try to explain. In order to do so, we will illustrate with a letter from a dear one who was being taught the meaning of it, but who did not understand and wrote to us for an explanation. A few days before Christmas, 1932, my husband, my brother, and I were in Los Angeles, walking up 7th Street. As we neared the corner of 7th and Flower Streets, I became very nervous and tired. The invisible holiness of persons was very strong about me, almost getting the best of me. We were to part at the corner. When we reached it, I looked to the left. A tall, thin man, very gentlemanly, was standing with his hat in his hand, begging. The sight of him filled me with an agony of pity. I exclaimed, "Oh, Hugh, look, that poor old man, do give him something." He turned to look and at once acted on my suggestion. I was left standing but shaking beside my brother Henry. I was fumbling for a coin in my bag when the thought came to me. I have already given on Broadway. So has Hugh. Henry has nothing to give. We are his only support, he being long out of work. Give to him, so he can give. I at once passed the money to him, saying, "You give it to him, dear." I was then alone, and looking the street I saw another beggar, and on the far corner still another. My knees seemed as if they would not hold me. A taunting voice was saying, "You give, and see what a holy thing you will witness." I was afraid of this invisible holiness. I could not obey that voice. It seemed to be jeering at and pushing me. Oh, what was I to do? There were too many beggars. The condition was entirely beyond me, flashed through my mind. Oh, I must overcome this awful terror. The thing must stop. I could not go up to any of them. I tried to brace myself. I feared I would faint. Then the huge buildings before me vanished. There was a picture poised in the air. Many forms in long white robes with heads uncovered were standing in tall green grass, beautifully green, reaching to their knees, the center form resembling our dear Lord Jesus. As the picture vanished, many more forms could be seen in the background. All, of course, quite misty. The sky seemed full of them. Oh, I was so weak and faint I had to take my brother's arm. What had I seen? My God, surely these must be the master's sheep, starving in green pastures. Oh, what could I do to help, I who was so helpless? In very truth is the Father, through his Son, our Lord and Master and his servants, who stand waiting in fields filled with plenty, ready and anxious to supply our every need. And they are very close to us these dark times, even as was seen by our friend in the above letter. Think not because you cannot see them that this is not so. We must lift our minds and hearts to them, or we cannot see and reach them, or they us. Those of his children who love and trust him, he never lets lack any good or needed thing. But it is necessary that each be brought to that perfect faith and trust, where there is no though or question that every need is met even before it is felt. What many are going through now is the testing, strengthening, and perfecting of his dear ones in such understanding. Men have for so long been led to believe that the good things of material life produced by science and the great intellectual advancement of the race alone are necessary and suffice, while they have been fed so little of real spiritual food by the hundreds of thousands of churches organized to provide it, that their souls today are actually starving. Souls have to be fed, as well as bodies, and unless they receive nourishing food, exactly as is the case with their bodies, they starve or suffer from malnutrition, feel depleted, depressed, discouraged, and the spiritual life which would sustain them drops to the lowest ebb. Who will say that mankind is not in such a condition today, with the exception of a comparatively few? We showed you in the first article herein where the bulk of humanity is at its present stage of evolution, on the higher desire planes of the earth realm. But we see that all men are now going through a most trying period, where the forces of light connected with their higher natures are preparing to free them from the darkness of their lower animal natures that would engulf them and prevent their taking the new step forward in evolution that awaits those who are ready. And there are a goodly number who are to be lifted entirely out of the darkness into the light of pure spirit, while all humanity will be advanced one stage farther toward the Venus realm of consciousness. That is what the great number of our brothers of light, seen by our friend above mentioned and by many others, are waiting for those who show any signs of seeking spiritual help. All are lovingly watched over, and all members of humanity, no matter on what plane of life, those on the lowest and darkest as well as those on the highest spiritual planes, will be advanced to higher planes by the quickening power of spirit now being poured down into the earth consciousness by the angels of light and love, who have descended close to earth for that sole purpose. Personal perfection. Because physical health and perfection are so much desired and sought after, we wish to present a few thoughts for your consideration. At that same time and for the same reason, because of their close connection, can be considered the desire for physical comfort and the good things of life, all consequent upon the possession of plenty of money. Not that health and money are to be despised by those trying to live the spiritual life, although in India they are so regarded, and a devotee actually gives away all he possesses when he starts out to find union with God. He renounces home, family, and friends, and thereafter lives wholly on alms, considering not at all his health in so doing. In the light of all that we have been teaching, that the physical body and all in the outer world are mere illusions, are but creations of the separate mortal mind, and exist only in that mind, and that man's real body and world are all good and all perfect now, and therefore do not have to be sought and striven for. Can you not see what desiring and seeking for that goodness and perfection in the physical implies and actually does for you? Think. You who are seeking union with your higher self, and at the same time are desiring freedom from that weakness or inharmony of the flesh, and from that condition of lack and limitation that is holding you back from the peace and harmony you crave. Remember the law. Whatever you think and hold in your consciousness as being so out manifests itself. Then, if you are trying to free yourself from something, are you not just as surely thinking of and seeing that thing as being so, and thus giving it power over you, as though you were deliberately trying to create it? What is wrong then, and how can you be free from the ill health and the limited conditions which you are compelled to endure at the present time, despite your earnest prayers and desire for deliverance from them? It seems almost impossible of a solution, does it not? But there is a solution, and you have been shown it time and time again. It is only you who have made health and money such a serious problem that you have chronic ill health and find money evading your constant efforts to secure it, that we are talking to now. We have hundreds of such writing us who need to see this great truth, and to learn the lesson we will try to make plain herein. Health of body can only come from harmony of mind. Harmony of mind can come only from knowing the truth, and knowing the truth can only come from letting go with your mind and allowing the truth to penetrate beneath the surface of mind into the soul, your true consciousness, where alone it lives and causes you to express and act the truth. By that we mean that you must stop trying to do anything of yourself, must chiefly stop desiring what you lack, and instead must simply let go, get quiet, and allow the life and health of that perfect body in the invisible to flow forth and express itself. Flow forth from where? From your soul, which is the real you, living now and always in your perfect body within. Let that truth penetrate through your mind to your soul, and thus open the door so that the real you can come forth. Yes, it is as simple as that. When you can once get your mind to let go, so your soul can act. And even as your soul lives in a perfect body, so does it live in a perfect world, of consciousness, remember, where all that the Father hath is everywhere present and always available for its use. There you need nothing, for the need always creates its own fulfillment, like air rushing into a vacuum. It will be exactly the same here, in your mind's consciousness. When you can altogether link your mind with your soul consciousness, by the mind simply knowing this truth, and letting a need's fulfillment flow through immediately into expression. But the trouble is, you say, in the mind's not wholly letting go, and in not perfectly linking its consciousness with its soul knowing. Well, if you know the trouble, why not work with it until you have conquered it? That is the only way you can get anywhere. And the remarkable thing about it is that you will need to do nothing. When your soul really sees that the mind wants to give up, then it begins to act and does all the work for you. Your part is but to cooperate with it by letting it. From all this you can see how foolish it is to desire anything in order to possess it physically or personally. It only separates you farther from your soul and closes the door, preventing the very thing from coming through into expression that your soul was seeking to manifest through you. If when you had first felt the need, instead of strongly desiring what you needed, you had immediately got quiet and connected your consciousness with its source, the door would have opened wide, and by this time, your own good would be manifesting freely in your life.